And I say this to my team a lot, especially for the young, people that we hire for attitude and not for aptitude. Aptitude is something that we can all teach. I would never hire someone who is lying on the first interaction. So that's really a red flag for me. And believe you me, when you have to be in time, you make everything happen to be on time. And that also talks about how important that interaction, that interview is for you. So for recruiters, be passionate about it. It's a very important skill. You are doing tons of favor to the organization by getting the right talent.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Weekday Show. I'm your host, Amit Singh, founder and CEO of Weekday, a hiring marketplace where job seekers can 8x their chances of finding their perfect job, and recruiters can supercharge their productivity by accessing the largest database of talent in the country. We have 80% of white-collar workforce of India on our platform. Check out Weekday at weekday.works. Happy to present to you the Weekday Show, where recruitment leaders share actionable insights and answer the most common hiring FAQs, and explore the hiring process from both sides, and dissect real-life interview scenarios.
Hi everyone, welcome to today's episode of the Weekday Show. I'm your host for today, Raghav. I lead growth at Weekday, and I'm super excited about today's guest for the show. So we've gone back and forth trying to set this up over the last few weeks, but we finally have the chance to sit down and talk. We're recording this on a Saturday, and our guest for today, Sulbha, has been kind enough to take time out for us on a Saturday. So I will introduce Sulbha, but before that, let me just welcome her. So Sulbha, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Raghav.
So for our listeners who don't know of Sulbha, Sulbha is on the verge of completing 2 decades of professional experience in HR. What I personally find super interesting about Sulbha is that despite being in the career for almost 20 years now, she's on her third company, one of which she founded. So technically, she's in her second job only. So she's as inexperienced as some of you. Um, that's on a lighter note. But Sulbha has had a fantastic career. She started with EY. She's been a founder herself in the middle between her two stints, one at EY and her current one at RenewBuy, where she serves as the chief people officer. And we'll talk more about each of these stints in the due course of this podcast. Can't wait to get started. Sulbha, awesome to have you on.
Thank you.
How's your day been so far?
Been fantastic. Had a good workout session and all set to be here and excited to be here and talk about things that are close to my heart.
Awesome. We're super excited to have you, Sulbha. So the way we'll do this is we'll have 3 segments. We'll start with a rapid fire with some fun and fast questions about hiring, about HR, talent acquisition, all of that. Then we'll move on to a slightly more fluid section, which is a deep dive into your journey, the learnings that you've had, the places that you've been at. And we'll try to get some takeaways from that.
Okay.
And we'll wrap with another intended to be fun section, which is called Hire or Pass. We'll give you some real life interview scenarios and we'll ask for your take on them. Sounds good?
Yeah, sounds good. Let's roll.
So before we actually dive into the first section, which as I mentioned was the rapid fire, I have a question to ask, which I'm getting the opportunity to ask today.
Sure.
So let's start with a classic. Tell me something about yourself, Sulbha.
The typical HR question. So I'm a multifaceted person. You know that I'm a chief people officer at RenewBuy. And that's one aspect of my life. I'm a mother of 2 girls. And my elder one is actually currently now working. And my younger one is in class 8th. Wife of ex-Fauji officer. So Army has a lot of influence in shaping me as a person. And I belong to a place called Lucknow, a beautiful place, rich in culture, and had some fantastic time as a child. And I have multiple interests. So I love working out. I love reading. I'm also on a spiritual path, so I pursue that. And I also like to have fun on the go. So yeah, I like to spend time with my friends and close ones.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Sulbha. I think that's a model answer for tell me something about yourself. People can learn a lot from that answer alone. Okay. So now that that's out of the way, let's dive into the first segment, which is the rapid fire. So good to go. Should we start?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So Sulbha, the first question, what is the most creative way that a candidate has ever tried to stand out from the crowd?
I think when it has happened a couple of times actually, when candidates have asked probing questions to me rather than just responding to the questions. The response to the question is a question, a probing question, and that's interesting because that talks about how the person is interested rather than giving a rote answer. They are keen to know where am I coming from and why am I asking that question. So I think that is something when candidates are interested in asking us the question, that's the way they stand out.
Okay, and would you say that that generally is good to do when you're actually given the space to ask your questions, or you can do that at any point during the interview?
Any point during the interview is just fine. If I have to give an example, if I say, if I'm hiring a recruiter, for example, and if I say, how many people can you hire, in 2 months or 3 months? I think when the candidate asks me, so what is your, offer to joining ratio? What is your funnel like? And what is your ratings on the social media, etc. I think that's interesting because rather than just giving, I can hire XYZ number and this and that. I think when they are asking, then I know they're applying their mind, and then they will answer. So they know their subject, they know their field, and that's kind of is a good indication for me that person kind of stand out from the crowd.
Got it. So I think the takeaway there for somebody who's applying for jobs today would be to actually engage with the interviewer and really understand what they're trying to ask and not be nervous about having to give a short and crisp answer.
Absolutely. I think it's important to know where the question or where the person is coming from rather than just simply going and like a bullet to start the answer. Understand and know a little bit of background and then try to compose your answers because then it will be more meaningful.
Okay, perfect. Let's move on to the second question. So this one is, Sulbha, in all these years, do you recall on a hire you made or a set of hires you made and think of that set of hires as the best hires you've done? Um, if yes, can you tell us about those hires? And if not, can you just tell us how a recruiter looks back on hires they may have made and how do they judge whether it was a good decision, a bad decision? How do they judge their own work?
I've had my fair chances of hiring good people and not so good people, I'll be honest. And we can't always get everything right. But I think I have done some very good hiring, and my team is a testimony of that. They have not only stayed with me, but have been a super performer. So, that gives me confidence. At times when you say, when we have not been able to hire writers, there is a lot of combination of the individual and the role and their own appetite and their own agility because we in a startup work very differently, and people sometimes coming from a very structured organization, if they're not as agile, may find it difficult. So we have had our share of good hires, and we have been able to identify that talent. But at times, despite of our best efforts and applying the best techniques of hiring, sometimes we have not had that great successes because other factors kind of come into the play.
So when just to follow up on this question, when you're talking about a good hire, um, as a recruiter, do you look back on somebody you might have hired who's grown significantly, and is that something which is like a positive signal for you? Or does that growth not correlate so much with the hiring decision?
I mean, it all depends on the level, Raghav, which we are hiring. So sometimes, obviously, at senior levels, past experience does matter, and how they have been able to catapult their own careers does make sense to us, because for us, it's important that we have an evidence that someone has been there, done that. So that kind of gives us the confidence. But a lot of times for junior roles or freshers, I think attitude matters a lot. And I say this to my team a lot, especially for the young, people that we hire for attitude and not for aptitude. Aptitude is something that we can all teach. There's no rocket science other than the very technical subjects. But for other things, I think lots can be learned. And if the person has the learning agility, the person has the hunger, I think, when there's right attitude, skills can be taught.
Got it. Got it. Great answer. Let's move on to the next question. Slightly more fun question. What is the most useless skill that you've seen listed on a resume, or what are commonly listed skills that you think are useless?
To be very frank, I only look at the data points in a resume. If I am screening a resume, and I look at, and I'm a very within the set of communication, the ethos, pathos, and logos. I'm a very logos person who looks at the numbers, because that kind of gives me a sense of the kind of impact of the journey the person has traveled. But some of the useless skills is listening to music. I mean, how does even listening to music is relevant? Or something very basic. I'm good in computers. So yeah, those are like useless and meaningless to be added in a.
So a variation of that same skill, would good listening be a good skill to list? A good listener, would that be a
Yes,
good skill
good
to list?
listening is very important, but
Mhm.
listening to music
Is not.
certainly. I
Maybe
mean,
that's what they were trying to say. Let's just give the benefit of the doubt.
right.
Great. Okay, awesome. So don't list skills like listening to music, watching movies,
Yes,
reading
watching
books.
movies. Yeah, I mean, reading books, and the funny part is when they write reading books, and I ask what's the last book they have read. So many times people are just copy pasting their resumes. So I
Yeah.
just get into the conversation faster.
And often it might be some childhood novel that they might have read
Yeah,
20 years ago.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Great. So Sulbha, next question. What have you, is there any interview question where you've seen strong candidates regularly bomb a simple question? And can you tell us what that question generally tends to be?
Um, there are a couple of them. So as simple as when you ask, "What are your development needs?" People unnecessarily try to show their strengths as their weakness, and it's a for an interviewer. I mean, we can see through it. There's no need. I mean, and we candidly want to know, because when we're evaluating a person for a role, we want to understand what are the strengths they're bringing and what could be the areas that to have a high self-awareness is a great thing. And if they don't have, then it's a red mark for me that they don't even know what their development areas are. So as simple as that. And as simple as why do they want to look for a change, and sometimes they give some very clumsy answers. And a lot of times, and unfortunately I've seen a lot of times people are only coming that they want a hike in their compensation. So I think those are not a great things to look at. If you're really looking for a job, there should be a strong reason. I mean, while compensation is important, but from the organization perspective, it's not. I'm looking for the person who's keen to join my company, is excited about the role and the impact that they can create and things they can do. Money will definitely follow on, but that can't be just the reason for looking for a change.
Okay, so what you're saying is strong candidates oftentimes will just tell you when you ask them why you're looking for a switch, will just be honest and tell you I'm
Yeah.
looking for a switch for money reasons,
Yeah, sometimes.
which is not a good answer.
Yeah, I mean.
Okay, and double clicking on the first question you mentioned, which is some areas for improvement.
Yeah.
What do you recommend is a good format for candidates to actually answer that question?
So the good format is that they should talk about the feedback they have received. And then they can say, for example, somebody can say, I received a feedback from my manager that my project management is the area of development, and these are the things that I've been doing. I think I'm working on it, but I'm still not yet there. So I know, and that's great because you're self-aware and you're doing something about it. And I know you're conscious about it. And for me also, I understand that this person needs something to do with the project management. So I'm going to ensure that if the person is onboarded, that support needs to be provided to him.
Okay,
So
that's nice. So that's like a pro tip almost. So be honest, talk about an actual weakness and what you're doing to address it.
Absolutely. And who doesn't have a weakness or an area of development? And so what's there to hide?
Don't try to say I'm too hardworking for my own good.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't
People
get-
say I'm too hardworking. I'm very honest. I'm very diligent. I mean, please
I
don't
take on too
camouflage.
much work.
Yeah, I take on. So,
Yeah.
and I don't know how much is that
Yeah.
upper reality
Yeah.
also. So yeah.
Next question, Sulbha. What is an interview red flag that you commonly encounter besides the obvious ones?
I have seen and I've rejected a couple of candidates when I see that, because if they're not true and they're lying, especially between their switches, their reason of changes, that's a red flag. A person who is like trying to hide in the first go and saying contradictory statements and lying about it, that's a red flag. I would never hire someone who is lying on the first interaction. So that's really a red flag for me.
Is that something you also consciously look out for? Consistency across answers?
Yeah, I do look at it.
Okay. And does that also apply across interview rounds for candidates who are watching this? So they might have said something in the first round, but then when they're talking to you, the same question, is it okay to answer differently? Or
Until unless there is there is a reason for a changed answer, but as simple as the reason of change in their past companies, why should that change? That would have been a fact, right? So if somebody's twisting a fact, I would not appreciate. But if there is an answer where they think, for example, how would you contribute, etc., etc., they can have a different answer. First, they in the first interaction they would have thought something else and said something. Over a period of time, there would be some time lag. They would have thought more, and they would have prepared themselves better, and then saying something. That's okay. But factual data saying incorrectly, it's a red flag in terms of it just talks about their own integrity and their own character. So I mean,
just to, I think interesting follow up here is, are too perfect is like an answer too perfect? Is that also a red flag where they're so consistent with their answer, it feels like they're lying, even though you have no reason to.
yeah, I mean, you can make out actually, Raghav, if people are making it up, it's evident on their face. And because as interviewers, and we have been interviewing so many hundreds and thousands of people now, I think we have developed that knack also that we can pick it up, that how how camouflaged or how made up that answer is. So I think people can see through.
Got it. Got it. So be honest, be yourself.
Yes,
Talk
absolutely.
about your weaknesses honestly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Nothing is better. I mean, honesty is best policy is a long, I mean, it just works beautifully well.
Great. Awesome. Last question of the rapid fire round. What is an overrated interview question that you see many people always asking? And what is an alternative to the question, which is a better question to ask?
So I see a lot of people asking, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I think as interviewers, we should ask what value you think you will bring to the organization in the next 5 years. So that will give you two indication. Person is looking for a long term or not, and is the person confident of his abilities to scale up and do more. You don't know what level and what numbers anybody would be, but in terms of the things that they want to do and they aspire, I think they will be able to articulate, and that would be a nicer thing to ask.
So where do you see yourself in 5 years? You think is not relevant to
I mean,
the hiring decision you have to make.
And I don't know how can you even calibrate that, because organizations' vision may change so much more. But when you talk about a particular person's skills and all, they can always talk. How do they see contributing in next 5 years? And then you can. If I have to answer, so I would say apart from HR, I look forward to contributing to the other aspects of the organization and learning more and picking more. And if there is an expansion within India, overseas, I would love to do that. So, I don't know whether that will happen or not, but that's something that I look forward to. And that's something that I think that's the kind of value I will bring to the table.
I think also good opportunity to convey your desire to grow and the direction that you want to grow in.
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome, perfect. Great answers, Sulbha. Thank you for those answers. I think we can close the rapid fire here. It was fun. Let's move to the second section, which is hire or pass.
Okay.
In this section, like I said earlier, I will give you some scenarios, some hypothetical, some maybe not, and I will describe to you types of candidates. And what I want is your take on whether or not you would hire this candidate or pass on this candidate.
Okay.
Sounds good?
Yeah, sounds good.
Let's start with the first one. So the first one is the cultural chameleon. So this is a candidate who is extremely adaptable to multiple types of cultures, You can see that they've worked in multiple types of companies and all of that. The other side of the coin is that you're not too sure how sincere they are. You're not able to get a handle of their real personality. What is your, as a recruiter, what is your take on this situation? Would you be confident about a hire, or would you rather pass?
Very different name that you have given, chameleon. But to be very frank, for startup, we look for people who are agile. Okay. Someone who has worked in different cultural setups, different experiences that person would have had, and have molded himself or herself for different roles. I think it works well for us. I would not see as a red flag out there. As long as the person is been sincere in all of the roles and has added value and has delivered. Agility is a great thing to have these days. I will not see it as a red flag there.
Okay, so this would be a hire.
This would be higher.
Okay, awesome. The next one is the ethical dilemma. So this is a candidate who in the previous organization has maybe crossed the line between ethical and unethical. But this candidate is also very upfront about it. They tell you about it themselves. They tell you what they've learned from it. That said, you can't obviously brush the ethical sort of quandary under the carpet. So, what do you do in that situation where there's a candidate in front of you who is strong otherwise, but there's this one thing to consider?
And that's a tricky one, Raghav. And personally, I will give it a pass. I will not hire. The reason being, for us, ethical standard means a lot. And, when you say someone has done ethically incorrect, so if it is a financial fraud someone would have done, or something with related to people, if they would have done any kind of, misconduct, both are extremely, non-negotiable for me and for our organization. I would appreciate that they have remorse and they have learned their lessons, but I would not give a.
But no second, not with Renew.
Yeah, because sometimes just to give you an example with respect to a financial fraud, people's price tags may change. Yeah. They did it for a particular price, and I'll never be sure. And unfortunately, because it will be in the back of my mind, I will always wonder, God forbid if something wrong happens, and that will always be in my back of my mind. So might as well just give
and
it
the
a
trust deficit will be too hard to overcome.
Too hard to overcome. So I might as well give it a pass.
Got it. Even if it's a super strong candidate.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
for
Great.
certain, it's like value system, right? If you don't have that, you either have it or you don't have it.
Okay, so pro tip for the listeners: don't cross any ethical lines.
Yes, please
I don't think you need a podcast to know this, but
don't cross it.
hey, you learn every day.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so the next one is the industry expert. So this is a candidate who has extensive experience in a similar industry that you're in, but there is somewhat of a skill gap with respect to the specific role that you're hiring for. They don't necessarily have all the skills, but they have full exposure to the industry and willingness to learn. What's your take? Hire or pass?
Hire.
Okay.
Attitude is important. Like I said, certain skills can always be developed. थोड़ा तो हमें भी काम करना है ना as an organization. So, and I always tell my people also, my hiring managers also, look for 80%. That's good enough. 20% we also have to contribute to the candidate. It's not, and if everything is like just picture perfect, then what is my role as a manager when I'm hiring? I'm also hiring in my team. Then I also need to do something for the team member, right? If the person comes with the right set of experience, industry experience, and couple of skills here and there, that's what our job is. And if they are not super critical to success, I think I'll be good to hire.
Got it. So I find that pretty interesting because there's a lot of talk around skill-based hiring and source-based hiring and credentials-based hiring, with most modern companies sort of going towards more and more towards skill-based hiring. And you who spent 20 years in HR is telling us that, hey, you can ignore some skill gaps. Not all skill gaps are critical. So how do you sort of make that distinction between what is an important critical skill? Is that at the level of the JD that, hey, this is a non-negotiable skill and others I can kind of be flexible with?
Okay, so let me give you an example and probably if that makes sense. And what I mean by critical skills and not so critical skills, someone who has to be, for example, in an MIS team, simple example, let's take. person has to be very good in Excel, no doubt about it. But if the person is not great in communication, it's okay, yeah, no worries. We will that is not something that will hamper his job. So super critical skill is Excel, macros, Python, etc., etc. But communication skill is a negotiable skill. I will still hire the person if the person is good technically. I don't have an issue hiring the person.
And in your JDs, are these skills two separate categories, like non-negotiable skills and skills that are good to have?
Yeah, we do mention must-haves. So those are mentioned there.
Got it. And you sort of judge accordingly. So
Yeah.
must-haves you don't compromise on, and good to
Yes,
have.
yes. So some bit of the technical skill I will not compromise. Some of the softer skills, the other aspects, maybe I will be flexible about it.
Got it. Great. So the next question in this section, hire or pass, is the latecomer. So this candidate, everything is great. They dress well. They're professional in every other way. They can do a good interview. They seem like they have the skills for the job, but they've been late for 3 out of the 4 interview rounds that they've come for, and every time it's been traffic or something else. Um, what's your take? Hire or pass?
Attitude, fail.
No hire.
I come, like I said, I told in my initial introduction, my husband is a Fauji, ex-Fauji. So being on time is something that I've learned. And believe you me, when you have to be in time, you make everything happen to be on time. And that also talks about how important that interaction, that interview is for you. And that's why I was saying I would love to come here little early and then be just on time.
Yep.
Because for me, it's like if something is important, I will give that importance. And I will make sure that I revolve my life in a manner, or I organize myself in a manner that I'm there available on time. And that's the real way of, how else you would judge attitude. Otherwise, attitude का तो exam बड़ा मुश्किल है. So right attitude, मैं aptitude में compromise थोड़ा कर सकती हूँ, but not on the attitude.
And I can vouch for that because Sulbha was 15 minutes early today, which made us rush. Usually we are late. So
Yeah,
I can vouch for her being on time and being
So yeah, I mean, every once in a while I will accept, but you mentioned specifically 3 times
3 out
and
of 4
all.
times.
Yeah, so yeah, red flag. No, not hiring.
Great. Awesome. Okay, the last question in this section is the gap year traveler. So this is a candidate who has a gap in their resume. Let's, for the sake of this question, let's call it a 2-year gap.
Sure.
And their reason for the gap is not nothing medical or something unavoidable. It's a voluntary gap that they've taken. Could be to travel, could be to just take some time off, could be anything. Hire or pass in terms
Hire.
of just this criteria alone.
Hire. This
Okay.
can't be a reason for rejection.
Okay.
Someone who wants to prioritize their personal life, wants to explore. I think traveling is itself a great teacher. You learn so much through traveling. Earlier days, people would travel to different places, and there was not formal schooling. So if somebody has taken a break for traveling, why not? I think we would get more from that candidate because their experience would be far more varied. He would be more culturally sensitive. He would have had so much more experience. I mean, that can't be a reason for a rejection. I would definitely hire.
Let me just give you another reason, which maybe might get us another point of view, which is, let's say I've taken 3 years off for UPSC prep. How about that?
That's also okay.
That's also okay.
Yeah, because people, again, the person was working hard. He was aspiring for something. And unfortunately, that did not happen. Does that make him a bad hire? No.
Okay.
So I would, in fact, if somebody is working for a UPSC and did not, at least I know for sure that the person is extremely hardworking.
Yeah.
You would have, and for 3 years he has been doing it consistently. So I think that's a good skill to have. I would not give it a reject. In fact, I have hired someone who was, and this examples give me I just reflected. We just hired someone who was preparing, and I did ask, won't you give this exam again? He said, no, ma'am. Now I'm like, I've done it. Yeah, I'd not give. But yeah, that could not be a reason for me to reject. Again, like I said, Raghav, core skills and attitude. If that's there, I don't have an issue. People will have reasons sometimes. I know a lot of times earlier women used to, be looked differently, not say down upon, but oh, she prioritizes her kids more. She will not be serious about work and this and that. I think now situations are very different. Men would have their own reasons, and it's absolutely okay as long as They know what they're sure of the skills. They know what what value they are bringing to the table. They come with sound reasoning. I'm absolutely okay.
I think one important caveat would just be upfront about the gap.
Yeah.
Explain
Of
explain it as
course.
honestly as
Yeah, I
possible.
don't want them to lie about it for sure. If they're lying, then it's a red flag for me. But otherwise, if they candidly tell me, I will be more than happy to have such people on board. I mean, provided all the other boxes ticks, it will never be a rejection because of this.
Got it. Okay, awesome. So if you have a gap in your resume, almost flaunt it. Be proud of it. Explain why you took that time off.
Also talk about what they've learned through it. No, there's nothing wrong in taking a sabbatical or a break. And when you're saying flaunt it, talk about what have you learned through it. That's very important for a employer. It's important to know what is the value do they think they have added, be break or be otherwise. If they're able to articulate that, that's fantastic.
Are you looking for a job? You can 8x your chances of getting one by using Weekday. How 8x? By doubling the chances on 3 fronts: referrals, customizing your resume, and applying to double the jobs. Weekday can help you on all 3 fronts. Did you know that you can double your chances of getting a job by asking referrals? You can do that via Weekday by just one click, where people can give referrals to the existing companies via the Weekday platform. The second one is customizing your resume for every role. Did you know that 60% of the applicants of a job are never seen by a human recruiter? You can double your chances by customizing your resume based on every job posted. Well, it's not feasible to do that. You can do that via AI. So Weekday's Chrome extension allows you to customize your resume for any job. The third front is applying to double the jobs. Imagine if there was an easy apply on every careers job posted everywhere. What we allow via front-end automations is that you can just click once and no need to fill multiple long forms on every careers page. Give that information to us once and utilize it everywhere else.
Let's move on to the last section for today, which is a deep dive.
All right.
So in this section, we'll get to talk about the journey that you have been on over the last 2 decades.
Okay.
So you are the focus of this section. Not to put you on the spot.
No worries.
Great. So Sulbha, to start off this section, what I personally found interesting was that you got into HR in 2004. And from what I can tell, HR was not cool back then. So why HR in 2004?
It's an interesting story out there. I was doing my engineering, and my best friend was studying in IIT Kanpur, and he told me, you should become HR. Somebody in my campus had come, and she was like this, and I think and I didn't not know H of HR then, and I was just focused on my engineering. And when I did get into MBA. To be very frank, finance was my major and HR was my minor. But I got into EY and in the HR, and I give all the credit to my manager then. She pushed me and said that I should remain in HR, and HR, you are meant to be in HR. And I don't regret a single day. And I just totally love doing what I do. And yes, it wasn't so cool then. And that time marketing used to be the hot thing, and finance was something that people were taking. So I did take finance, but but I totally loved the subject while studying. And when I came into EY, I think it was a great, while it was not cool, but I think it was a great decision to.
And you just stumbled upon it, right? Somebody told you that you should be in HR.
Yeah, I mean, I was not aware, but somebody made me realize that I have it in me. So yeah, that was a good thing, and I kind of also. It happened and I followed, and it just worked so beautifully well for me.
I think HR as a space in general has grown so much. You've kind of rode the wave.
Yeah.
And
lots has happened.
Looks like a great decision in hindsight. I think you can take more credit for it. You don't need to say that somebody told me I should be an HR person.
No, I did. I really enjoyed studying. No doubt about that. I enjoyed studying a lot. But yes, when I was actually in the internship when I was actually practicing, and that's when I realized that it's so much fun to work with people and help them, and help them navigate, and it was far more fulfilling than anything else. And so great decision then.
Great. Um, and now you've spent almost 2 decades in HR. Like I said in the intro, what I find super interesting is that you're only on your third company, your second employer. Um, please talk to me about that, because it's very rare these days that you find somebody like that. So what is the secret to staying at the same company, growing within the same company? Is that advisable? Would you give that same advice to somebody who was starting off today? How do you think about this?
Every individual may have their own choices, but to be very frank, Raghav, I was extremely fortunate. I got immense learning in both the organizations. So, talking about EY, I joined as an intern, then I moved to the tax HR, and then I moved to the corporate HR. And within corporate HR, I did so many things. I think there was always an opportunity. I would ask for something and I would get it. That I said, I want to work on this, I will get an opportunity. I would pick this up. There was a time that I wanted to do something in CSR. My manager said, I'm happy to let you do that, but your work should not suffer. I said, I'll stretch and do. But the opportunity was given to me. And so I never felt the urge to look for a change. Monetarily, I have always believed that money follows great work. So, and that never, it was decent. I mean, there is always no limit, upper limit. But I was satisfied. So that happened. So again, I didn't feel the reason I moved out of EY was my younger daughter was very young, and I also had to take care of her. But I also knew that I am like super happy and ambitious when it comes to my work, and I can't sit idle at home. And then I conceptualize that I would get into entrepreneurship and do something on my own. There was always a burning desire to do something on my own, and I would always struggle thinking, I'm in HR, how can I do my own business, what can I do? And just the puzzle just the maze got cleared, and I just thought about why not HR consulting. And EY always kind of there used to be an award, EOY, Entrepreneur of the Year award, and that kind of ignites entrepreneurs being felicitated and all. And I thought, why not try something of my own? And I did, and I was God was kind, and I got a lot of good work. And I never did a single cold calling. All the work happened through references. So it was a great, fantastic journey. And now, in fact, RenewBuy was my client.
Okay.
And there's a joke here that they poached me from my business. So I used to earlier consult for a day, and then they asked me to move it 2 days. It was tough because I was handling other clients. But then they say, why don't you join us full time? By that time, I was really enjoying what I was doing. It was great team, great purpose and vision. So I thought, it kind of aligns. And I took a switch. And here again, not a dull moment. So when I started, we were just about 50 odd people. Now we are more than 2,500 people. So that's been a great journey. Within the HR space, I think I've done a lot. It's not just HR. I've got to do, I get to meet the investors. I get to interact with the board. We acquired a company called RTOmatic.ai. My founder said, why don't you lead it? So I was part of that acquisition. And I get pretty much involved in all aspects of the business, be product, be tech, be sales. And I have a point of view, and I'm able to share that. So it doesn't really feel like a job for me. It's just an extension of my entrepreneurial journey. And that's what I like, and not a dull moment. So, I mean, the thought of changing just doesn't occur to me because I don't get Monday morning blues.
Okay.
I'm always excited.
That's great to know.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, it's so rare. But if I sort of am deducing correctly, the last time you actually applied for a job was 20 years ago, because RenewBuy just happened. It was a client. Before this, you were doing your own business. So the last job you applied for was EY.
Actually, I did not apply for EY also. I applied for internship at EY, and with internship, that got converted into a
Okay,
job.
so you never actually applied for a job.
I didn't.
Oh, this podcast episode is a waste. No, I mean that was a joke. But in terms of interviewing candidates, seeing it from the other side, I'm sure you've seen thousands.
Yes.
So still there's value to get from this conversation. But I found that pretty interesting that you never actually applied for a job. I don't know how many people go through a 2-decade professional career without even applying for an opportunity. So that's awesome. Great. So my next question is actually about the entrepreneurial journey that you mentioned, that you touched on. Not many people, especially after being in a job for a few years, sort of gather the courage and the gumption to take a swing and do a business. Um, you mentioned some of the reasons that led you to it, but can you just talk about what that experience was like? How did you get started? Um, would you recommend it to people, and how would you recommend people think about something like this?
I will again give a lot of credit to EY and my colleagues there, my manager and my HR director then. I had a personal reason, of course, but they were the ones who helped me, take the first step, because EY became my first client itself. And I was, very. The journey was extremely enriching, Raghav, because the learning curves is not just 10x, it's 100x. And consulting as a business itself is so enriching because it's not about just one organization, one sector. You have clients across different sectors. So I had big fours, I had boutique firms, I had retail, I had manufacturing, and I had, security agencies. So very different clients, very different challenges. And the learning was immense. And as an entrepreneur, it's not only just your HR that you were consulting, that you were doing. You have to look after your GST. You have to look after the wage bill of your people. You have to look at after your branding. You have to look at your client relationship. All of that. So everything comes alive, and it is very, very fulfilling and holistic. I would certainly encourage people to go for entrepreneurial stint. Um, and while I wish everyone succeed, but even for one person, if they don't, they should not feel bad about it, because the experience itself is so enriching that you can never get anywhere. Because when you're in a job, it's a very, it's very comfortable. Uh, your AC, your chair, everything is taken
And
care
whatever's
of.
missing, you have the HR person to complain.
Yes, you always have the HR person to blame. हाँ, मेरा ये नहीं चल रहा, मेरा वो नहीं चल रहा. Exactly. But when you're on your own, all of a sudden you become far more responsible, because your people are dependent on you, your clients are dependent on you, and it's a very, very different learning experience. Yeah. So everyone should, if possible, give it a try and make something out of it.
But with eyes wide open, right?
Of course.
Because you mentioned that.
Yeah, and some of the tips that you said, if somebody wants to go for it, definitely identify your strengths. I always say play on your strengths and not on your weakness, because there's no point.
Got it. So, from what I can tell, pretty broad scope of work, and that's to be expected given the title that you enjoy. But what I found interesting was you mentioned talent identification, talent scouting a few times.
Yeah.
So, if you can just double click on that, how does a company like RenewBuy hire? Um, and I think maybe we can talk about this with the help of a particular opening, right? An example. So a few days ago, I saw that there was a data science manager opening uh, via your LinkedIn page. I think this is about a week ago.
Yeah.
So we can do that opening or an opening like that. How does an opening like this get created? How does it come up? Is it org expansion? Is it attrition? Is it something else? How do you decide requirements? How do you decide how to source candidates? Just walk us through the process of an opening like this, getting created and getting filled.
So there could be multiple reasons, Raghav, for a position getting opening. So, for example, data science, for particularly keeping that as an example, it could be that we want to kind of expand in some product, right? And there is a need for a data science team, and it could be because of the business. It could be that we already have a team and there is a nutrition and it is a replacement hiring. Or it could also be that we want to expand it further, and then hence we already have, and there's more work coming and the further expansion happening. So that can be the thing. And that's how there's a continuous dialogue with the business and the HR, and then we keep evaluating and looking at the need of the business. And instead of being reactive, we love to be more proactive, seeing how's the business expanding, what are the requirements, and can we start already looking at the. So that's when the need gets created and gets published. Talking about the sourcing, we use multiple sources and such technical skills. We really rely on LinkedIn. I think that has worked pretty well for us. We do get references, we get internal references as well, and we have other job portals too. But yes, primarily, that happens. We have then method of selection. Of course, we publish, we get a lot of resume happens, and then there is a screening process. Our ATS is also able to sift the candidates in terms of the skill set that is required. And then there are a series of interviews that happen.
Yep.
Typically, for a senior level, hiring within this space, we would have 3 rounds for sure. And for a junior round, it could probably be just 2 rounds. And sometimes a technical assessment may be required, again, depending upon the level, junior levels for sure. And then basis the final shortlist, the selection is made.
So thank you, Sulbha, for that overview. I just want to double click on a few things you touched on.
Yeah.
So one of the things was, so these are reasons that the opening comes up.
Yeah.
What I'm interested in understanding is how exactly are requirements for that opening framed? Is it the hiring manager? Is it collaborative between the hiring manager and the HR person? Do you take into consideration what's available in the market? Because the requirements that you're trying to put together then may not be a perfect fit.
Sure. No, but we collaborate with the business. That's very important. We don't, like I said, we don't work in silos. It just can't happen that hiring manager will say, please hire me someone, and we just start working on that. That doesn't work. There has to be a conversation. We always try to understand, why do we need somebody externally? Don't we have the skill set internally? Is this groomable, not groomable? Is that trainable, not trainable? Or if there is too much of a gestation period, and so data science per se is something that is very hot skills these days, and we don't have as many experts internally, and hence the requirement. And also we understand our business, like I was just mentioning when I was talking about the RenewBuy, how the artifact solutions etc are playing around, and there we need a lot of people in with this skill set, and we know the expansion that is happening. And hence, we then discuss, okay, these are the projects, these are the clients that they're working. More work is expected. We need to ramp up, and hence the need for an additional requirement. That's how it happens.
Got it. And now, so once you have the requirement, you mentioned using a bunch of platforms, right? LinkedIn, other job portals, and you said LinkedIn works really well for technical hiring.
Yeah, it does.
Two things I want to understand here. How exactly does a company like RenewBuy use LinkedIn? And more generally speaking, what is the split of inbound versus outbound?
So we do have a LinkedIn recruiter license with us, so we definitely use that. And the split has been 50-50 almost. I was looking at the data also. So for technical hiring specifically, we have seen about 50 odd % coming through LinkedIn, and for the rest, be LinkedIn and other portals, we have a mix of about internal references, etc. About they comprise together 50%. That's really the ratio breakup.
So you're saying 50% of the openings that come up at RenewBuy, you actually do outbound hiring for. That means your recruiters will reach out to find candidates, reach out to them, and try.
So we publish the openings and people apply. So there is a lot of inflow through that. And then, like I said, through so we have internal references, manager references, and other job portals through which people will source.
Okay, now once a candidate, whether through LinkedIn or through a referral or anything else, is in your system, from a candidate's point of view, I want to understand, what can I do to maximize my chances of actually being seen by a recruiter, and actually sort of sailing through that system and landing an interview to be able to get the job? What can I do?
So very important, look at the JD and and highlight your own experience and your skill set. It's just quickly helps us, identify. Even my ATS does that. It looks at the JD and it looks at the resume and then tries to make the match. So it's extremely important. As candidate, don't just use the same template of your CV for every position. Sometimes you need to look at your resume and need to modify as with the requirement of the role. So if you are really keen and you think you have the ability for that role, please look at your resume and ensure that it talks to the JD that's been shared. So that's extremely important. Next is um, anything that you feel will accentuate the kind of work that you have done or the impact that you have created. Small or big, don't worry about that, but highlight that. And it should literally be, I would prefer something written in a bold and it can quickly, catch my eyes. That's important when I'm looking, because we are screening so many resumes every day. And shorter the better. That also talks about your ability. The brevity means a lot. I have seen resumes of 7-10 pages. I mean, it frustrates to go through that. And unfortunately, people write the same thing literally over and over again. Not required. Just the brief it is, the better it is for us, and your chances of being called will be higher. I will say that.
How about a referral, Sulbha? Like, for example, let's say I've seen an opening on your LinkedIn page and applied. So I'm in the system. Now, how do I actually boost that profile to the top of the stack? Apart from customizing my resume, trying to get the ATS to trying to play the ATS game and trying to be shortlisted that way. Does it make sense for me to reach out to somebody, let's say the hiring manager or somebody in the team, and say, hey, I've applied. Can you help refer me?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Please do reach out. We like proactive candidates. Why would we not? That also talks about your own interest level, right? So do reach out to people within the organization or the hiring manager and tell them that I've applied. Can you please evaluate? Let us know. It will just really help you come up the stack, and people will look it and give the feedback quickly. A lot of times people do reach out to me on my LinkedIn personally and say, ma'am, I've applied, can you check? And I immediately send it to my team and they respond. So yeah, it does work.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
So from in terms of framing the takeaways, one would be to be mindful of the JD that you're applying against and sort of tailor your resume for it.
Yeah.
And the other is reach out to people after you applied and try to sort of boost visibility, right?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Even with these two things in place, Sulbha, what percentage of resumes would you say are never seen by a human recruiter?
It would only happen if the position gets filled quickly by the initial candidates. Otherwise, we would typically see the resumes. And otherwise, they generally come to our, like I said, we do have a ATS, so they kind of become the part of our CV banks, so to say. And whenever the need again arises, they would get looked at. But yeah, it would only happen if the position gets filled quickly.
And also, if the ATS is not, let's say your resume is not perfectly tailored to the opportunity, if the ATS doesn't surface it, I'm guessing that should be a significant number of cases.
Could be. It could be 15-20% might be the case that it might. So resume doesn't has the right words which are there in the JD, and it might get missed.
Got it. So you're saying at least for a company like RenewBuy, chances are that if you applied and you applied smartly, your resume will at least be seen.
Hopefully seen, yes. Like I said, unless the position gets really filled quickly.
Got it. Okay, perfect. So next follow-up question here is on the screening. So I'm guessing you get a lot of volume because you have RenewBuy is a great company, you have great jobs, you're growing. So and the market is like the market is. So I'm guessing you get a lot of volume.
A lot of volume.
How do you actually make sure you can find the right person how do you find the needle in the haystack?
Wow, that's always a challenge for us, and that's where the recruitment team does come into the play. We, for the time being, we are only relying on ATS, to be very frank, on the initial screening, and then we do have the recruiters who also do that. But it is a tedious task, Raghav, I will admit, and does take a lot of time. Right now, we are only relying on our ATS and our people, to be very frank. We would love to know if there is something else, that can come and help, because getting the right talent is the most important, priority for us. And we want to do a bloody good job out of that. So, if something can be there and can help us, we'll be more than happy to look at that.
Got it. So it's a challenging thing that you
It
try to do
is.
your best at, but you're open to suggestions.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
the crux of the answer.
Absolutely.
Okay, awesome. So Sulbha, just to wrap up this section, if you can give us a broad sense of what the numbers in the funnel look like, recruitment funnel for a company like RenewBuy or companies that you've had experience with in the past. Let's say for a data science position.
Yeah.
How many people apply? How many sort of people get called? Just the entire funnel, please.
Sure. So data science for a junior role, if I look at, we would easily get 150 odd resumes easily, or maybe more at times, depending upon the season of the year also.
Right.
And we would typically call, depending again the quality of the resume that we have received, 20 odd percent would get at least to the first level of the interview. And then from there, I think further scheming happens, and 5-7 end up in the final round. And that's when we, for the final round, the final selection, we typically have minimum 2 to 3 candidates before we finalize on one.
Okay, so 150 applications, 20% you said is the first round.
So yeah, 30
in the first
30
round,
people, 30 odd people.
5 to 7 in the final round,
Yeah.
and then 3 shortlists, and one of them gets the offer.
That's right.
And then from offer to joining generally tends to be what conversion? So my question basically is, do you make multiple offers for the same position?
Yes, for hard skills we do, because when we are discussing and negotiating, if we know that the person already has an offer or is actively looking out, we don't want to drop out at the last minute. So we sometimes, for few positions we do. For senior positions, that's something that rarely happens, because a lot of times people are themselves mature. If they accept an offer, they generally don't reach. But yeah, there have been instances for the junior role that we have ensured that we have multiple offers there.
And have there been cases where all of those offers have gone through and people have joined and you're suddenly overstaffed?
I think a skill like this, and at a junior level, we don't mind actually.
Yeah.
To be very frank,
No such thing as overstaffed.
yeah, actually, we are growing and there is a need, and a couple of more hands are always useful. So we don't mind that.
Okay, awesome, perfect. So Sulbha, thank you so much for sharing insights from your journey, sharing your experiences. I think this was another fun section. Sulbha, I think we've had an awesome conversation. At least I really enjoyed it.
Same here, Raghav.
I
It was
think
interesting.
there's as I go back and sort of go over the recording and as we do the post processing and put it out, I'm sure there'll be a lot of insights that we'll be able to, specific insights that we'll be able to get from this conversation. So thank you for being so generous with your time.
Thank you, Raghav, for
with
giving the
your-
opportunity. It was wonderful talking, and some of the things I really spoke from my heart, and I could share that experience. And I hope your audience is able to pick it up, because it's important that they also know the perspective of the employer, because I think a lot of time they're just guessing what do they want and how do they judge. So I hope they find it useful.
That's one of the reasons we started this show. Candidates who are going through interviews very often don't have perspective from the other side. And so thank you for being generous with your time. So, but before we close, I just want 2 pieces of advice from you.
Okay.
One for recruiters early in their career, and another for candidates who are sort of early to mid in their career and are trying to figure out how they should chart out the rest of their career.
Recruitment is a very specialized skill. Unfortunately, I don't know why, but in HR, people say they think if nothing else, be a recruiter, and that is such a unfair thing for a recruitment as a vertical. I think every HR should be a recruiter. I, at my position, also spend so much time in looking for candidates and interviewing candidates. So that's a very core part of my job, even being a CPO, right? So for recruiters, be passionate about it. It's a very important skill. You are doing tons of favor to the organization by getting the right talent, right? So and be extremely intelligent about how you are scouting the talent. Um, like you mentioned, it is like finding a needle in a haystack, right? How do you use your time effectively and reach to the right candidate? How are you screening? How deep understanding? Spend time with the hiring manager, understand the requirement very nicely, understand the business, because when you're it's not only selecting the candidate, you have to also sell the organization to the candidate, right? So know about the business, know about the role, and be very articulate about what does the organization do, what does this role include, what are the skills, how will they use, what are the opportunities for the candidates. I think they should be very good at even selling the organization and the role, so that's equally important.
Got it. So for people early in the career, if I can just rephrase or put it in my own way, would be sort of similar to what you said for recruiters, right? Take a holistic view. Don't look at just the next job. Instead, take a 20-year view of your career.
I mean, yeah, at least think about, will this really excite you? Yeah. Will this make you wake up every day in the morning and I will today, aaj kuch अच्छा करते हैं.
I think the problem is a lot of times for a lot of people, the answer to that, it because of ignorance, not really having found what excites them, is that the only thing that excites me is like being in bed and like the weekend. So
Yeah, I hear that a lot. Work-life balance is very important. Yeah, I mean, they have their choices there. But yeah, I think whatever time they work, that should be interesting. That's what I feel. I mean, it's your life, your time. Don't let it go away, and do something which is really worthwhile and you enjoy personally. What's the fun of doing a job when you don't enjoy that work? So I would definitely ask them to look at the job more deeply, more holistically, and before picking up, have more conversation to get that confidence. Yeah.
okay, awesome, perfect. Thank you, Sulbha. I think
Welcome.
we can wrap today's session here. Hopefully, we'll do a follow up because I'm sure there's more to learn.
Sure.
But today's conversation was awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking out the time.
Thank you so much, Raghav. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Sulbha. Thank you.
Are you struggling to hire talent? At Weekday, we have built a database of 80% of white-collar workforce with their email, phone number, resume, and salary details. And you can send automated email plus WhatsApp plus call sequences to them. Yes, we call candidates on your behalf as well. Because India runs on WhatsApp and calls, we end up getting as high as 40% response rate. Gone are the days of sending a LinkedIn invite and waiting for days for someone to accept. Just use Weekday. Whether you are looking for a database to supercharge the productivity of your recruiters, or you're looking at a complete AI recruiter to do everything for you, we have a solution for you. Visit weekday.works to know more.